Ilana, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I am super excited that you're here today. You and I have had the chance to connect beforehand, but hopefully for a lot of our listeners, they're going to be learning something new today. Actually, I know they're going to be learning something new today. But before we jump into it, so I do this with every guest. It's probably the most important question that I'm going to ask you today. It's a question that our listeners want an answer to, and it also helps to set a bit of a tone for the rest of the interview. When it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no?
I'm so happy we didn't prepare for that question. So I have been advocating for pineapple with green olives pizza. So much so that I gave a talk for Women's Week in North Bay, I think 2 years ago, and the hotel I
Yeah.
stayed in had a button that just said pizza.
Wow.
So I pressed it and they asked me for my order and I said pineapple and green olives.
Yeah.
And the person I talked to could not believe that I had ordered that. And I
Yeah.
think I converted him. So it's a very enthusiastic yes.
I don't know how to feel about that. Like I'm super pumped that you're team pineapple because that's me as well. But green olives is it's like anchovies to me. Like I don't
It's
want
the
it anywhere
salty and
near.
sweet. You gotta try it. It's the
Okay.
salty. It's together. I don't want just a pineapple pizza. It's got to be both.
Yeah, usually there's everything. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I will try it. I'm open to new ideas. I love to expose myself to new things, especially when advice comes from someone like yourself, Alana. So again, we've had the chance to connect, but our listeners may not know you. So for some background context, Alana, who are you and what are you doing for work right now?
Yeah. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Yeah.
I am a toy designer turned social entrepreneur. So I started a company called 21 Toys just after leaving design school. And we're a training and development toy company. We use toys to teach what textbooks can't. So skills like empathy, failure, that the experts say are the future of work, but we stopped teaching and valuing after kindergarten. So we have a series of toys that are used by practitioners like educators and coaches, facilitators who use it in companies. But we like to say we're ages 6 to CEO. And we also run workshops and training programs. So my inspiration for all of it is actually I decided to quit my design job when I first heard Sir Ken Robinson talk. He has a famous TED talk called Do Skills Kill Creativity? And I think I was screaming at my computer, just yelling
Yeah.
yes. So
Yeah. Okay, that's super cool. And I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper into these toys and kind of the story that is 21 Toys. But let's talk about, so you mentioned quitting your job. Let's talk about your pathway a little bit. So again, this podcast, this is for middle and high school students and their teachers. So a lot of these young people are considering possibilities for life after grade 12. Can you talk about your path a little bit? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't just turned 18, became a CEO. What did that look like for you, Alana?
I like to say I'm a recovering A student. So
Okay.
I worked really, really hard in school to get good marks. I grew up in Winnipeg and I love Winnipeg, but my only way out of Winnipeg into my dream school was full scholarship because we didn't have the financial means to do that. So marks weren't just important for me, they were my like lifeline to what I was going to do next. So I obsessed about getting A's and I had to get A's. And I was really good at math and science. My teachers really encouraged me, but I was equally passionate and almost as good in the arts. But I found that my school thought of arts as kind of a hobby, something that wouldn't really ever land as a real job. And so when in my last year of high school, I chose art instead of computer science because they had booked them in the same time slot, it was like I'd committed this horrible like treason.
Right.
And I think just for me, for that, the idea that being good at school was a definite, now I'm going to be good at life, I'm going to be good at work, I'm going to have a great, future, just isn't the case. And so I think for me, my journey to starting 21 Toys had to do with going through an education system that I felt undervalued creativity and overvalued science and tech and completely ignored anything to do with emotions and how emotions play a crucial role in all of those skills.
And then, so what about after school? Where
Yeah.
were you working?
So I was very lucky. I did end up getting a full scholarship and I went to Carleton University in Ottawa and I took their industrial design program, which is a 4-year bachelor's design. So it's like product design. So not only,
Material items, like for
yes,
physical things. Yeah.
designing everything but a building,
Okay.
essentially. So computers, shoes, we had to make a collapsible cardboard chair. So my joke is I was in the engineering and design department. So it was the workload of an engineering department, but the arbitrary marks of an arts program. So just it was hard. It is a hard program, but getting marked on how I drew or my ideas was completely new to me. And so I felt like completely like a fish out of water. And the other thing that I found so interesting were some of the best students in my class who were some of the best designers, as well as our professors. A lot of them had dyslexia. And what was fascinating was that a number of them had had such a negative experience in high school because they thought that there was something wrong with them. But then they were excelling in our design program. My uncle is in fact an industrial designer, and he's dyslexic, and he's a professor now. And so I just started continuing questioning, like, what are we valuing? What are we telling people directly or indirectly makes them good at school and therefore a good, successful person. And so all of that got completely undone. So by the time I graduated university, I was just full of rage and anger, but equally inspired. Design thinking is an incredible path to figuring out how to creatively problem solve. Design includes emotions and includes science and tech. So I think the program that I went into, and this idea of quote unquote, if you learn about design thinking, it's this idea that you don't work in silos. Everything is connected. And so the design thinking process starts with, conversations around things like empathy, which led me to, in my 4th year of design school, I actually designed the toy that I launched 21 Toys with.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. You'll find a little bit later. I mean, we'll start with this one. So it's really interesting to me to hear you talk about the grades thing, right? So I get that it was your way out, and I get that within the system that we're still living in and playing in, that good grades are going to help you get to that school that you may want to go to, right? But it's pretty funny now thinking about the toys and what you're talking about, empathy and failure and these soft skills, these 21st century skills, how these are the things that employers are demanding from us, but they're not necessarily correlated with good grades, right? Just because you're really good at cramming and studying for that algebra test doesn't mean you're going to be a great communicator and team player and everything else that I'm sure you're looking for when you're hiring people for your team as well, right?
Yeah, I think it was in the 1970s, the top job skills were reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Sure.
And so what we teach in school aligned with that makes sense. But right now, lots of schools are trying to adapt, and some are doing it successfully and some are figuring it out. But companies and colleges and universities already, they're focusing less on marks and more on performance, portfolio-based, experiment-based ways of showing what you do and how you think.
I'm a big believer in proving it with a portfolio, right? Let's showcase evidence of your growth and your abilities, which we can come back to a little bit later. But so the dyslexia thing, that's super interesting. It's an aside. Have you noticed, is that just a trend or a trait that's common in designers, or was that a one-off in your program?
I think it is a trait. I don't have too many studies to back that up, but just from my own lived experience, I don't know all the factors involved in how maybe students with dyslexia self-select design, as well as I would imagine that with dyslexia, you see 3D objects, you see words as 3D options, you see things kind of differently. But yeah, it was fascinating just to see that. And I think the biggest thing I had was there were these students that were getting, incredible support and marks in our design program, and they thought that they were bad students going into it. They had all these issues coming out of high school that told them that they were no good. So just interesting the different contexts or environments you put someone in.
Yeah.
We decide that they're a failure or a success based on that environment.
Yeah. And this is a bad example for anyone just listening to the audio of a podcast, but I'm sure you've seen that picture where, they're talking about assessment and you have all these different kind of animals, and the assessment is climbing a tree, and one of them is a fish. Of course, the fish isn't going to be able to climb a tree, but he's so good at some other stuff, right? So it's the system that we're playing in, right? The third thing I want to touch on from what you were just talking about, Ilana, was the empathy toy. So tell us a bit about that. So, I mean, you told us kind of some of the origin story, but so if I'm an educator, I'm listening to this, and I understand that empathy is maybe the skill that I need to be helping my students to develop. How could something like your empathy toy allow me to do that? What does that look like for me in the classroom?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'll quickly touch on, I originally designed the empathy toy for the visually impaired community. So when you're in your thesis year of design school, you get paired with an organization, and I got paired with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. And so I designed this abstract, it's now wooden, it was plastic when it was a student project, but it's this abstract wooden toy that you play blindfolded. So if you and I were playing, you would have a set of 5 unique 3D puzzle pieces that connect in hundreds of ways.
Yeah.
I would have the identical piece, and we would both have to recreate those patterns so that they're identical. And there's over 9,000 like combinations. The challenge is that we'd both be blindfolded. So in 5 to 15 minutes, we'd gain huge insights into how we navigate patience, frustration, but most importantly, how do we creatively communicate? So whether you're 6 or a CEO, whether you're in with 2 or 200, the game acts as a metaphor for a real life scenario. So I was originally just like testing it with a grade 4 student classroom, but then I would take it to my studio at night and test it with sighted adults in my studio. And that's when I saw that the age range was, the toy wasn't exclusive, it was inclusive of like multiple ages and abilities.
Yeah.
With the world being online right now, we've been able to adapt it. So up until March of last year, so 2020, we're in over 52 countries. So our empathy toys come with guidebooks on how to adapt the game. So you can play it in 52 different ways. The core element is still there. It's about only being completed when you take on multiple perspectives of others and you're able to see things the way that they see them. Metaphorically, you're creating these shapes and patterns, but there's so many different topics that you can cover. So anything from team building, collaboration, all the way to design thinking and business. And so we have guidebooks on how to run lessons and workshops and adapt. And where I get the most excited is seeing teachers get creative. So in our first year, teachers would call us and they'd say like, we played it wrong. And then they describe it to me. And I was like, can you send me how you played it? We'll add it to the guidebook, because you didn't play it wrong. You added your own creativity to it. So it's all very meta, full circle. But this last year has been really incredible, where instead of being in the same room and playing and communicating and recreating those puzzle patterns, we're now meeting online over, let's say, Zoom. And instead of putting on blindfolds, we're all turning off our webcams. So everyone has a toy at their home. They're turning off their webcams. We're turning off the chat windows. It's fascinating to see what happens when you give somebody, 10 to 15 minutes to play with something that mimics a real life experience, and all the different insights and behaviors that come out of it.
Yeah, no kidding. And congrats to your team doing a great job pivoting in the year that this was. I've had a chance to use the Empathy Toy years before you and I even had a chance to talk and meet through Dr. Ramit Billen's one of her workshops. And I can speak firsthand for everyone listening to the experience that it was. There were about 10 or 15 of us at one of these round tables. And it is amazing. So teachers who are listening to this, I know you're gonna check out the website later, learn about how you can be involved with the Empathy Toy, whether it's online or, as we look forward to September, maybe potentially.
Yeah, and I would say we run free global play sessions. So they're 90 minutes, run them multiple times a month. We're now gonna be doing them with our failure toy. So you don't need a toy to participate. Yeah. And I know with budgets and everything that can be challenging, but we do offer educators discounts. So if anyone is interested in participating, you can do it with or without a budget at this point.
Fantastic. There you go. So Ilana, now we know a bit more about, let's say, what keeps you busy between 9 and 5, but let's learn a bit more about who you are. So what's your 5 to 9 look like? What are some of your hobbies, passions, interests?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question for an entrepreneur. I would say definitely the hours I keep take up most of my evenings, but on the weekends, I've been trying to push digital detox for a while. I grew up in a Jewish home. And so if you're familiar with like the Sabbath, I call it like Shabbos. And so we would use it as an excuse to put everyone's phones away, invite, 20 friends over for dinner, and just reconnect that way. So I'm very much looking to the days where I get to do Shabbos. My hope is also Shabbos and Schwitz. I'm a huge sauna fan. I almost started 21 Toys in Helsinki in my early days, even a few months before I called it 21 Toys, when I was just starting the business. I was invited to an accelerator in Helsinki. Cool. And it was amazing. It was interesting. I was the only female. They don't take any equity, so it's just advice, and it's financed by the Finnish government through university, through Aalto University. Nice. And every day we would sauna afterwards. And so it took me after 3 weeks, I said, okay, fine, I'll sauna, I'll try it out. And now I'm completely obsessed.
Yeah, you got hooked.
Completely hooked. I think it's an incredible way to build community, be healthy, connect with each other. So if you know me for longer than a few weeks, you'll know that I own schwitzcarlton.com, which is a passion project I'm hoping to launch.
Okay, I'm looking forward to checking that out. Speaking of hooked, as a designer, are you familiar with Near AL? Do you know that name? Maybe it's more product design for the software world. He wrote a really popular book called Hooked about all the ways that companies like Facebook and Google are gamifying their software to keep you coming back, that kind of thing.
Okay. I think I'm familiar with the book Hook. I've definitely heard of that.
Definitely a pretty popular book, yeah. But he just wrote another one. He just made me think of. It's called Indistractible. So you should check it out as part of your weekend detox. It's just about how we're consumed and obsessed with technology and some proven science-backed research strategies to keep it away. Sounds like you're already on top of it and you're doing a good job, but
top of it or doing a good job, but I'm attempting to do it. So I think that would be great. I think especially this last year, there's going to be a huge need for how we can contrast. Like we're so much on the screen. I think we're at a point now where we probably need to be intentionally off the screen.
100%. And actually it was through this podcast and talking to a few other smart people that one of the patterns that I heard was that it's not just young people, it's anybody. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's going to differentiate you is the ability to focus, right? So just being able to, it's as simple as just hitting do not disturb, right? And just being able to get the work done. Right? It's little things like that that'll help set you apart, but that book will help you take you to the next level. Speaking of things that distract you, so let's talk about Instagram. Are you personally on Instagram, Ilana?
Yes. Yeah. I run our 21 Toys Instagram as well. So I've built 21 Toys from the ground up. So we don't have any investors. There's a whole other podcast on women entrepreneurs and how they are and aren't supported, but I've been bootstrapping it, which means I've been funding it just through us existing.
Yep.
But because of that, we're a really small team. So we wear a lot of hats. So I am very much personally on Instagram, and the company also has a presence on Instagram.
Yeah. Instagram has many benefits for things like that. And so what was the name of the women-led podcast about women entrepreneurs?
If you're curious about it, SpacesEDU is an organization that we were lucky enough for one of the 5 ventures that got funded, but they just got a huge investment from, I think, the Bank of Montreal, and Justin Trudeau just attended their summit this week talking about the impact they have. So they have some pretty radical ideas on how we can change the ways we look at money and the ways that we look at funding.
Yeah, radical generosity. I'm a big fan of CEO and Vicky. It's really cool what they're up to, and love the bootstrap story. So my blueprint, we're bootstrapped as well. And so there's many of us who wear many hats. And I like to think of this, when I tell people about it, it's a 15-year overnight success. I think you're already at a much faster pace than we were. So you're doing a great job. Reason I asked about Instagram. So again, many great benefits, especially for promoting a company. But I have a love-hate relationship with it. The hate part being that oftentimes, depending on how it's used, a lot of the content is not very authentic. It becomes kind of a highlight reel or a best of. So when young people are comparing their lives to these highlight reels, it's very inauthentic, right? So I use this kind of as a segue to ask you to speak to the opposite of that. What's a failure? What's something, can be personal or professional, that you can speak to that you think the young people listening to this would benefit from hearing?
I mean, there's so many to choose from. I would say, and I know so many share this, especially adults, especially if we're perceived as, like, in different circles, perceived as really highly successful, that we only post the good stuff. I do think that it's changing a little bit, where people are starting to share a bit more of the behind the scenes. I think for me, especially with the failure toy, so I have a Medium post that I could share with you afterwards on the failure to launch the failure toy. So I tried to launch it 3 years before we did. But I think that has a lot of lessons about creativity and how to navigate feeling like you're going to fail. But I would probably use this moment, especially if you've got students listening in who are thinking of maybe starting entrepreneurship or just what their next steps are. One thing that I wasn't made aware of when I started my business was like, and this is what I'm hoping to write about and actually post in the next few weeks, which is the vulnerability of entrepreneurship. So when you start a business, you are not just financially vulnerable, you are vulnerable in every direction. And that means that the type of people that show up to help you is varied. So some people just want to support you, and that's amazing. Keep those people close to you. Other people show up and they want to work with you. And just because someone is passionate or excited to work with you doesn't mean that they should work for you. And I think one of the lessons that I didn't know going into entrepreneurship was the importance of community and the importance of keeping yourself close to and connected to other people that are both going through what you're going through, but also mentors and advisors, people who've been there, and make sure that you connect with them one-on-one to see how you're doing, because when you start a business, you're going to get very close to or experience some version of burnout. You're going to experience some version of a huge, massive failure, not something that just makes you feel bad, but something that has really serious impacts. And if you can have people around you that can support you and help you through that, that's crucial. Because I think one of the biggest failures that I have seen so often is that people are too proud to reach out or don't feel safe to say, I'm struggling. And instead we kind of bury it, and then we hide it, we're shameful, and then we never talk about it, which is the entire reason I wanted to start the failure toy, which is that in schools we practice, I like to say, failure abstinence. So the idea that we're not going to teach it. Everyone's going to deal with some version of failure, and they're going to have to figure it out on their own. And we're just going to focus on getting good marks. And that's kind of, that's what success is. And if you don't get good marks, then you're no good. And then on the other end, we have the startup community that's saying fail fast and fail often, which is very exciting and passionate, but it is also sometimes really tone deaf, and it can really not make any sense. If you're a doctor or if you're working on something where fail fast, fail often just doesn't make sense. So we just have these two extremes where we're not having the real conversation, which is, what does failure look like? When do we decide something is a failure? When do we decide something's a success? And most importantly, how do we all show up when we're stressed, when we're, given expectations, when we have expectations of others? That's the delicious, juicy stuff that we could all benefit from, unpacking and exploring.
Yeah, you're right. Those are two polar extremes, right? And thank you for being vulnerable and talking about vulnerability. I'm excited to read that post. We'll link to the Medium post as well, talking about the failure toy in the show notes. And when that post is ready, we'll be more than happy to amplify that across our network. So thank you for that. Speaking of this vulnerability and being a CEO, starting your own company, let's talk about hiring a little bit. And you alluded to it before with things like the portfolio piece and being able to speak to your abilities. This is a hypothetical scenario I love to throw all of our guests, right? So you're hiring for a position at 21 Toys, and there's one spot open, but you've narrowed it down to 2 candidates, and they have almost identical resumes on paper. What have you found over the years? Like, what's that one competency, that soft skill that's going to help separate one candidate from the other?
Ooh. I think I'm trying to answer it from a 21 Toys lens when we've hired, but also from the lens, because I have so many other entrepreneurs in my community. And so I'm trying to think of what the patterns might be. But I think when we're assessing someone, it's really about what skills do they have? So if they start on Monday, what can we give them right away that will, take the pressure off of some part of what we do? But beyond what their skills are, you want to know, what are they able to learn? Are they able to explain their thinking? So that's a big part of when you explain your portfolio, when you're a designer. You don't just present your idea. The goal is for you to walk through, what was your decision-making process? How did you do research? How did you make those decisions? How did you present those decisions? And so I think someone who's humble, hardworking, they can be confident in what they do. They can have a bit of confidence and arrogance, but it can't create a blind spot. Where I think one of the hardest types of situations I've had, and I would say others as well, when you hire, is someone that is unwilling to be wrong, or just says, well, I have an idea and you have an idea, and so your idea wins or my idea wins. Really, you're looking for somebody who has a lot of self-awareness about how they brainstorm, how they problem solve, and then is able to communicate that and bring other people in. Yeah,
you did a good job bringing it all together at the end there, because you hit a bunch of them, right? It's communication, also empathy. I mean,
yeah, well, I didn't want to throw that. I mean, I'm giving a talk tonight even, but yeah, when we give keynotes, spoiler alert, the number one job skill is empathy. How do you test for that is a whole other question.
Sure.
But absolutely, social and emotional skills are, you will know from all the studies, those are where you get the top performers. It can't be your only skill, but it's core. Yeah.
Huge. So what's a life skill you weren't taught in high school, but maybe you wish that you were?
I feel like this is said a lot, but yeah, I wish, there's finance. It would be great if someone just sat down, not just taught you how to do your taxes, but like, how does the economy work? What are the decisions we made as a society? And how do, politics and voting intersect with economics? What part of the machine am I in? Why would I choose to have a job or create a job. Creating a business never felt like it was an option.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like I didn't know till I met another entrepreneur and I was like, so who told you were allowed to start a business? And they were like, I just did. And I said, okay, so you can just start one.
Yeah.
Like I was under the impression you could. And then I think to go back to the work that we do, it really is about the School of Life actually has this incredible YouTube clip on what schools should teach.
Okay.
And the third one is relationships, is understanding relationships.
Yep.
I don't know a single adult my age who is not in counseling or in therapy or getting coaching. And I think the stigma is going away. People aren't seeing it as you only go to therapy if you're sick, but it's this idea that it's overlooked in our schools. And the number one reason why so many challenges that you have in your life related to your job as well as your personal life has to do with relationships and emotions. And we're just not prepared or taught that. So it kind of happens like in between classes, in the playground and then at home. So like the amount of learning that I have been lucky enough to receive or experiences over the number of years have come from challenges and conflicts in the working relationships that I have with my team, with my friends and family. And then one of the single best things that an entrepreneur can do, I don't have a co-founder, and I'm also, this is the first time I run a business, but coaching, someone that challenges you, gets you to reflect on your behaviors and can kind of guide you through the dynamics of, how to build something and interact with people. Those are all skills that I think I definitely could have benefited from. And I think we all could have really benefited from.
You're 100% right. And coaches are huge, right? Whatever age and stage you're at in your life, right? Someone to hold you accountable. And, a lot of what you just talked about there was the self-awareness piece, right? Yeah. Your whole life is just going to be, regardless of your job or your industry, is working with other people. And you're right. It's the thing that just gets taught in between classes, not intentionally.
And on the more optimistic end, I mean, science, tech, those are super important, but they're always going to change.
Yep.
So you're always going to learn the latest and newest technology. So it's not that those aren't important, but we like to say the future of work is human. And so if the future of work is human and, we've got AI around the corner, we're talking about like the robots are coming, as some people would say, it's those that are going to be able to be those complex creative problem solvers. They're the ones that are going to, and the organizations that invest in that are the ones that are going to really thrive in this kind of new world of work.
Yeah. So what can you do that the robots can't? And the robots can't be empathetic relationship builders, right? So let's talk about, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, Ilana, is strong opinions loosely held. And the way I like to preface this question is that a strong opinion loosely held is something that you believe strongly in, but you're open-minded enough to still receive new information as it becomes available. So for example, and it's interesting since we've been talking about it already, but my strong opinion is that I believe grades and tests, they actually do more harm than they do good. Do you have a strong opinion, Ilana?
Yeah, I would add to that. I think I like to say that school is a poorly designed game. So the idea that we're all playing it, I played it, we still need to worry about marks. Marks still matter, but I've never interviewed somebody and asked them for their marks.
Right.
I've asked them what they've done, where they've worked, what it's like to work. I asked the people they've worked with what it's like to work with them. The thing I'm the most passionate about, to bring it all together, is this idea that there's a study that came out of NASA, actually. They were struggling to hire a creative rocket scientists and engineers, and then they studied creativity through a series of tests. They took like 1,600 kindergarten students and took them through this test and discovered 98% of them were creative geniuses. And they were so excited, they followed them for years and years and years. By the time that same group was 25 years old, less than 2% were still considered creative geniuses. And this idea that we educate our creativity out is very real. But the good news is, I like to say, this was solved 100 years ago in kindergarten. So a lot of people don't necessarily know. Kindergarten was invented by a 19th century German philosopher named Friedrich Frobel, and he did it with a series of toys that he called gifts. And so my whole thing is, we know that kindergarten works, we just stopped kindergarten at kindergarten. And so we not only said play is no longer how you learn, we said play is the opposite of learning. It's the opposite of work. It's recess. It's like frivolous. It's this other thing. So I feel very, very strongly that we need to start embedding play and bringing play back, not just into our schools, but into our businesses. So the good thing is, like, we are still creative geniuses. We just haven't flex that muscle in a really long time. So
Yeah.
that's naturally who we are as humans.
You just got to bring it back up to the surface. Toys are the new textbooks, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There we go. So let's finish up with some rapid fire questions for you. Okay.
Mhm.
You have a billboard. Everyone's going to see it. You can write one thing on that billboard. What does it say?
I'm blanking on whose quote. This is not my quote. But I love to say you can either be a good example or a horrible warning. So that's one of my favorite quotes.
I don't think I've heard that one before. I really like that. All right,
I'll try to credit it.
Well, for the show notes, we'll find the right person. So this, loaded question. I already know the answer. IQ or EQ? You can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
Yeah, it's a hard one, but I am probably going to go with EQ.
Yeah, probably. Did you have a favorite class in high school?
Ooh, I did. I'm trying to remember. I mean, art, I loved art class, but I would also say I loved musical theater. So I was the lead in Guys and Dolls in grade 12. So I got to play Adelaide. So that was a lot of fun in routine classes. So anything that let me be creative, even in my physics class, I would always, any excuse to draw the challenge, I would do that.
That's super cool. Do you still sing, or is it just a shower thing at this point?
I shower sing. If you read my origin story, I paid for my first round of empathy toy prototypes. I was a karaoke DJ for a year. So
that's super cool.
Use my karaoke DJ money to pay for toys. Currently, just my shower. Just the neighbors get to enjoy it. So.
Okay, cool. What's a book that you've read that's had such an impact on you that maybe you'd wish you'd read it before you were 18?
I love the Tao of Pooh. It's about Winnie the Pooh and Taoism.
Okay.
And it just talks about how Winnie the Pooh and all of the like owl and piglet, that they all represent different, I'm going to get this wrong, but different kind of like emotions or tropes. I grew up in a very like anxious environment. My community and culture, we like to talk and interrupt each other very fast, which I love, but just slowing down, not pushing against the tide. I think, the Tao of Pooh is a fantastic book.
Thank you. I haven't heard of that one myself. We'll again link to that one in the show notes. Okay. And then hypothetical scenario. So you're the superintendent of a school district and you're tasked with deciding one skill. So one of these competencies that your students have to display evidence of in their digital portfolio in order to graduate. What is that skill?
For the first contractor that we hired, who's now our director of training and facilitation, at the end of the job posting, we had him do an activity. We had everyone do an activity, draw us your blueprints of a spaceship. And so I would say anything that is just completely insane, huge, quite playful, and then just see how someone approaches it. Let them show you what they are passionate about, what they love, and how they think, and get a little window into their brain. I love those.
Super cool activity. So it's almost kind of like a mix of maybe problem solving with communication, because you're gonna have to be able to explain how you're able to solve that problem, right?
Yeah, and all of it comes down to, we just want to know how your brain works. And also I'd love to know if you know how your brain works, because the more self-aware you are, the easier it is for you to be able to work with others.
That's such a great note to end this on. So where can people listening go to learn a bit more about 21 Toys, the Empathy Toy, and you?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram at 21toys. You can find me, it's my name. Just remove the hyphen, so at ILANABENARI. Our website is 21toys.com. It's the words, not the numbers, but you can always just Google empathy toy or failure toy and you'll find us.
And we're going to have all the links in the show notes as well for everybody. So, well, I can't thank you enough for this. I'm super excited that we've had the chance to connect a couple of times now. I'm really looking forward to all the new toys that you guys are going to keep coming out with, and the important skills that you're helping to develop in everyone from 6 to CEO. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.